of random.
What does joining Hip Hop Now's Patreon mean? It means supporting the kind of hip-hop content that keeps you updated on the latest hip-hop news and moves. It means supporting the production of content like That Time in Hip Hop and Hip Hop Now Reviews. It means you care about the conversation and preservation of hip-hop music and culture. Hip Hop Now Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, merchandise, and more. Support the movement. Become a supporter of Hip Hop Now podcast today at patreon.com/Hip Hop Now.
Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, Primo drops more unreleased Gang Starr music. Kid Cudi wants more credit for his bars. And Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 will receive the 2021 Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award.
Let's get right to business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album.
Come to Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast. The podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Shout out to the producers of this podcast, producers that get down and support this podcast every month via patreon.com/Hip Hop Now. It's a great way to support the podcast going into 2021 because honestly, if we don't get those producers up, the podcast might be over, and that's not a threat. That's just what it is, man. It's just what it is to see how you feel. Now, I know that this podcast does considerably well for what I expect as far as listens and plays and engagement, but I need you, the person that's been listening for however long and enjoyed every episode of this podcast, to come through as a part of this podcast and help grow it, like turn it into a video podcast on YouTube. It is possible, but it's only possible with your support. Not only do you get bonus episodes, but you also get exclusive content and exclusive insights into the moves and the different things we're doing to help this podcast grow, whether that be advertisement, equipment, or software. So visit patreon.com/Hip Hop Now. Or if you're like, yo, you keep saying it so fast, just look at the podcast episode, go to the description area, and the link is right there. Big shout out to those who always listen to the podcast. I'm glad you came back. New listeners, I hope you stick around, hit that subscribe button, like button, comment, and review. Because on Apple Podcasts, we had a couple of people review. I appreciate you. But also, if you haven't reviewed it, but you listen on Apple Podcasts all of the time, now is your time to go and put that review in. And I mean honest review. However you may feel about this show, don't worry, I can take it. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, The Source Magazine, Double XL, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Kid Cudi dropped a new album recently. I'm supposed to listen to it, but haven't had the opportunity to listen to it. Not yet, at least. And I saw that Kid Cudi thinks that he doesn't get enough credit for his bars. He says this, and I quote, "I'm slept on as a rapper." And he said when he was thinking about this, he thought to himself, well, what's a better way to test my skills but to do a song with Eminem going bar for bar? Now, I purposely, when this single was dropped, I purposely didn't listen because I was like, Kid Cudi and Eminem? I don't know what that sounds like. But I knew he had an album coming out, so I figured I'll check it out when the album come out. So I don't have no thoughts on the record itself or the album as a whole. Yes, I'm kind of somewhat of a closet Kid Cudi fan. I can't front, but it's not for the bars. And that's where I'm getting to in this story. I think, I don't know if Kid Cudi, I'm trying to figure out the best way to kindly say this. But I don't know if he understands that when we think of his music, whether you like him or dislike him, none of us think of bars, right? None of us think of bars. The term bars is reserved for people who could really rap, right? And I feel like Kid Cudi, yes, he's rapping technically, but I'm talking about people who can be very lyrical, meaning not all of their verses are on the surface. Some of them you got to figure out what's being said. Maybe you figure it out in the first listen. Maybe you got to listen a couple of times. Whatever the case may be, not necessarily a person that just creates puzzles in their music, but if you know the term bars, you know what that means, right? You know, your mind's going to be blown when you hear certain things. And I feel like with Kid Cudi and his verses, I've never gotten that. And again, I'm a big hip hop fan. I could follow bars, I could catch bars, I could write bars. But never, ever did I sit back and listen to a Kid Cudi album song that I like and say, woo, you heard what he said right there? Nah. And for those who are wondering, like, yo, what could Kid Cudi possibly have that I would like based off of what I heard that I don't like? And I would just say this. I consider Kid Cudi, for me personally, as a guilty pleasure, right? It's not something I would necessarily say is the best to me, or I'll put he's in my top 5, dead or alive, or anything like that. I just like it. I like the sound of the music. That's the majority. Honestly, that's the majority of why I tune in. I love the music he picks, and I love the vibe of the music. And a lot of times, sometimes the subject matter is interesting, and it's different. Not different in a way where it's so far out of bounds, but it's different from what you typically get on the R&B side, on the hip hop side, all of it. And I think Kid Cudi is the type of artist where it's difficult to put him in a category, right? He's kind of like Drake in a lot of respects, where Drake does a lot of singing, and it becomes conflicting to talk about Drake, even though he raps. Drake in a rapper standpoint, because sometimes he's not rapping as much, right? Drake probably got 1.5 album where he's rapping enough for you to say this is a rap album. And that's being kind. And that's probably his debut album and Scorpion album. I think on the Scorpion album, he was rapping a little bit more. But just to wrap up this Kid Cudi part, about him in the bars and feeling like he's underrated. Well, I'll say this, right? I don't think Kid Cudi even comes close to rapping in the same way that Drake does. I feel like Drake's bars is kind of underrated when it comes to fans who like to rate bars, right? And honestly, everybody will say, oh, he had a ghostwriter, but they wasn't saying that before that one whack record that one whack dude wrote, Quentin something, whatever, right? Like, to me, that wasn't a display of skill. So we'll see. When I listen to the Kid Cudi album, considering this is one of the things he's been talking about while this album just launched, I'm like, okay, so you telling me I need to tune in for some bars. We'll see. And to be honest, for somebody who liked his other Man on the Moon 1 and 2, and this is Man on the Moon 3, man, I don't want you to try to rap and boom bap like that. I don't know. We'll see. Unless Eminem wrote it. Funkmaster Flex is teasing a potential album that could feature 50 Cent, Tory Lanez, or I shouldn't have said it, DDG, King Von, and a couple of others. And there's a single, a single dropped. He dropped a single called Lurkin on Friday. I don't know, man. I did an episode a couple of weeks ago where I basically told you what it is. When it comes to DJs and compilation albums, I think Static Selector kind of got that on lock. K-Slay would have it on lock if he was a little bit more disciplined with the amount of MCs on one song. Because K-Slay is always going to pick a boom bap beat. He's always going to get all the spitters, but he literally gets all of them. And I think that's what takes him out. Clue, when's the last time Clue had an album? And there's a couple other people here and there, and I'm not counting producers. But when it comes to DJs, I feel like Static Selector is probably at the top. His new album that came out is decent. I ain't gonna front. I was a little bit disappointed. I feel like he's had better projects in the past. Maybe that's some fatigue on my end as far as the artists he chooses, but it's not a bad album at all. Definitely worth checking it out for anybody who wants to. So a lot of times when things trend on social media, right? In some cases, I try not to participate if I think it's nonsense, right? Because sometimes, the majority of the time, it's nonsense, right? So I really try to just say to myself, there are better things you could be doing with your time. Well, apparently, Vlad from Vlad TV was trending again, and it was all about unsubscribe from Vlad TV, his channel, his everything. Now, I did a podcast back in 2017. I'll link it in the description of this show, where I talked about how I liked watching Vlad TV because he had unique guests, right? He'd go get a lot of guests that you typically don't see on a bigger platform speaking. And it wasn't just the guests, it was the fact that a lot of times you learned, you gained a lot of insight into not only who they are, but stories of them and other celebrities. And it wasn't just rappers, it was, actresses and comedians, all types of people, but predominantly Black people, right? Clearly the target was African Americans on his channel, of all ages when you think about it. And maybe this was a couple of months ago, he had the situation with Farrakhan and not apologizing. And, it was a whole big thing and people was like, unsubscribe. And that was kind of the last straw for me. But back in 2017, I was still somewhat of a fan of the channel, and I was just trying to hope that he could recognize that if he continues to put rappers or whomever on there and allow them to incriminate themselves and put it out, even though he has the editorial veto for it, it started to bother me back then. But I figured, okay, enough people say it, he'll try to change it. And he tried to, right? He tried to do some more positive videos. He tried to do some videos where he talked about stocks and tried to bring on some more positive guests. But it feels like that died down a little bit, and he kind of just stuck to, whatever he can get. And I know I could dig it, because the thing is people will get upset at somebody like him for not doing those things I just mentioned, not putting people onto stocks and, having more positive guests. But a person like him is not going to do it because it's not seeing the same amount of numbers. But what he needed to understand is that it wouldn't, right? So fast forward back again from 2017, I was like, whatever. And the Farrakhan thing happened. And then I was like, all right, enough is enough. Regardless of who he has on and how intrigued I am by what this guest has to say, I'm just going to unsubscribe from this channel, unsubscribe from the social media feeds I follow, because at the end of the day, he's just a vulture, right? So I'd moved on. Well, apparently now, because Casanova, if you don't know, the rapper Casanova out of Brooklyn was arrested by the FBI. He was wanted by the FBI originally because of something or some things he said on Vlad TV. And they said that they had been watching his videos on Vlad TV for a minute. Now, on one point, you got to look at it like this, right? You got to keep it 100. Casanova and anybody who goes on, especially now, anybody who goes on there and starts talking about all of the action they got into in the streets and things they did, that's on them. They shouldn't be talking at all. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, not everybody thinks like that. And to me, Vlad is not really protecting his guest when he says that. Now, obviously, he said before, he tells people, hey, yo, don't say this because we can put this out. You you don't have to talk about this and that. But we've seen when Vlad has asked people about some details within their criminal past. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even when he's talking to Michael Jai White, you know what I'm saying? He's like, really, oh, you stabbed someone? Like, he's really thirsty for that part of it. Because then that'd be the first piece he cuts out of the video and puts up there to promote. So I said all that to say this, right? Everybody now, because of the Casanova situation and feeling like Vlad been the police, and now Vlad is officially the police because the FBI is saying so, obviously is bad for business. So anything he does to make amends will seem like a reaction to something he really didn't care about when he was doing it, especially since I believe he had put the video back out to get some more views off of it, which is kind of smart. But at the same time, it shows you he's a vulture. So the thing is if you feel like you don't like Vlad TV's practices, then I would suggest you stop watching. Unsubscribe. It's okay. Some of these guests can appear on other platforms. Sure, there are a ton of platforms who, for whatever reason, don't see fit to bring on some of these guests that he has that wind up blowing up. And maybe it's because Vlad pays some of them, pays to get some of them up there so they can do what they got to do. But moving along from that with some brighter news, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 are going to receive the 2021 Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and I cannot believe it. These are hip-hop pioneers. If you don't know, the group was originally formed in 1978 and consists of members Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel, the Kid Creole, Keith Cowboy, Scorpio, and Raheem. Probably their biggest song is the 1982 hit record, if you ask me, The Message, one of the most classic beats, classic hooks. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. That's how some of y'all rap now, you know what I'm saying? Which I don't know if that's a compliment or disrespect, but whatever the case may be. Pioneers in the hip-hop game paved the way for a number of your legends, whether it's legends from the 90s, 80s, 99 to 2000s, all of that, you know what I'm saying? How do I feel about this? How do you feel about this? The Grammy giving them a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think it's way overdue when you think about the impact of hip-hop on the world. Like, it's way overdue for our pioneers to not have received these kind of honors, right? This type of spotlight, right? Like, some of these guys, you can walk past them in the street and most people won't even know them, and it shouldn't be that way, right? The Rolling Stones couldn't walk through Soho in New York and people not stop, selfie it up, not mug them, beat them up, but mob them, let me say that, as fans, because these are legends to them, right? The Beatles couldn't do that. Paul McCartney couldn't just be up in Soho just like, yo, hey, what up? Let me get number 3 on the McDonald's menu. He could not do that without it being a scene. And I feel like our legends, and I wrote an article about this a minute ago, I feel like our legends don't get the same kind of love from the community. And I think even casuals in hip hop don't really know about them. You know what I'm saying? Know enough about them, know how important they are to the hip hop game. And I'm going to just tell you a quick story because I probably said this on a podcast episode of the past, but it's something I got to keep saying because it's only gotten worse. At one point, I was supposed to be a writer on NPR Music, right? I was supposed to collaborate, write a couple articles. This was back when they first launched. And I was going to be, helping out in the hip hop side of things from, a person who looked out. So I was excited, like, word, I like writing. I'm going to write some articles and I'm thinking of all kinds of topics, right? And a lot of my topics were all about in summary, some form of preservation of hip hop music and culture, meaning talking about people who don't get talked about anymore, but had a huge impact on the hip hop game, whether that's financially, something they did, which opened the door for somebody to do something else or do the same thing and do something bigger with it. Stuff, just really looking back at legends. And it wasn't all old school, but it was about, the true school. And that's anything that was authentic hip hop. And I remember the woman in charge, whose name I'm not going to say, she didn't want any of that, right? And then when I tried to explain, like, well, I can understand if you don't want these topics specifically, but, my goal is, to me, what I don't see on this site is any talk of hip hop's past and how it relates to the current and the future. And she wasn't interested in that. She was more interested in the obscure part of hip hop, right? Finding somebody who does something different. Now, I could dig it. When you say something different, that, for example, I'm not trying to say if she discovered Das Effects, and this was back in the days, and she was like, I want you to write about them, I'd be like, nah, that's not real hip hop, because that's not true. I'm not talking about evolution. I'm talking about nonsense that hip hop fans, old and new, would not even pay attention to. Like, this, dude in Cambodia rhymes just the first syllable together. And it sounds like, oh, well, that sounds like hip hop, right? But then when you hear it, it sounds like complete garbage. And it's like, well, why are we doing this? We're doing this because it's unique. And I feel like there are too many people who want hip hop to be what they want it to be now. And I'm not talking about fans. I'm talking about people who co-opt the culture. And one thing I discovered about her background versus my background, where I knew it would never work, was the fact that she went to school for hip hop. My school of hip hop was in the streets. I was raised around it. The things she's going to school to learn about, I was there. Now, granted, no, I wasn't in the Bronx when hip hop was created. I was an infant when that happened, right? But my point is a lot of the history, a lot of the things that she would go to school to learn about, I was doing, We were beatboxing. We were breakdancing in the street. You know what I'm saying? We were battling each other. We were learning how to rhyme and freestyle and all of that. Like, it was a part of our culture. So if I was raised in the culture and you were taught the culture, I mean, at some point, one thing is artificial, right? And one thing is authentic. And again, that's not in no shape or form am I trying to say, I'm the supreme being of hip hop versus anybody who went to school for it. But she wasn't that far away from my age to having gone to school for something like that. You feel me? I get it if it's somebody like, a teenager now. Yeah, sure. There's just a lot. You can't expect them to, you can't say I was at the Park Jams. You wasn't. Of course he wasn't. He wasn't born yet, right? He might have been there if he was born because he loves hip hop. But to me, I just got a sense of someone who just found something, found the culture, and then because of a degree, they declared themselves knowledgeable of that culture. And I just wanted to know, who was your professor? But nevertheless, that just speaks to, again, preserving hip hop culture, right? Stop with the revisionist history. Stop trying to change the narrative. The things that happen in hip hop culture, they happen. You're taking away from our legends when you try to ignore them. Whereas in other genres, the whole damn band in a rock group could be gone. And they are worshipped. And the people that discover them don't do nothing but want to learn about what it was like to see them, to be around when that music dropped. And we don't do that with hip hop, unfortunately. We kind of move on because we feel like that's too far removed from what I like and know now. And that's kind of a problem, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't mean to go off on a tangent on this. It was just one thing that kind of was bothering me for a minute when I've seen some things, on Twitter and stuff like that where people try to, like in hindsight, look back and say certain things didn't happen. Certain people didn't rank certain places. And I'm just like, oh, you can't be serious. Like, do you? I just don't get it. Support the legends, man. Speaking of supporting legends, DJ Premier, one half of Gang Starr, released an instrumental version to last year's Gang Starr album, surprise Gang Starr album, one of the best yet, which is cool, cool to have. Like if you want to spit some bars over it or do some mashups with the beats and other joints, that's pretty dope. But one of the bonuses on there is that it features a brand new Gang Starr song called Glowing Mike with unreleased vocals from Guru. And I listened to this the other day and part of me is like, damn, why wasn't this on the album also? But in general, I just want to say that like Gang Starr doesn't have many things that are whack when it comes to music and songs. Obviously, we don't know where these lyrics are coming from. Judging by Guru's voice, it sounds like it was more of a newer track. I mean, Guru's always kind of had the same voice, but I think he sounds a little older around this time. But nevertheless, it still sounds like Guru, and it sounds good. And it's one thing I was thinking about. I was listening to Gang Starr's Hard to Earn, which is Gang Starr's fourth album. And I was just listening and I was like, you know what? I always used to say, like, when you think in hindsight, and maybe I'm doing revisionist history, or maybe when I listened to it, I was younger, now I'm older and I hear things differently. But I was like, you know what? Like with Guru, in a lot of ways, his lyrics were basic, right? In a lot of ways, right? He said things, but it wasn't really a lot of smoke and mirrors, lights, camera, action. Guru's strength was the fact that he made a lot of great points, right? He said a lot of things that were things you can relate to or agree with. It wasn't about lyrical, spiritual, miracle, flipping bars or crazy. But I think what also made it dope was the fact that Guru just always sound good over Premier's beats. Like their connection, they're coming together as a group. It's just magic. It just sounds. It's like when you hear a Tribe Called Quest record. Like for those youngins who don't know, every time a Tribe Called Quest dropped, especially after Low End Theory, it was like they could do no wrong. It was a certain vibe hearing Q-Tip and Fife, and a certain type of production. And it just felt like, what do they say? Felt like a warm blanket or whatever, comfortable blanket, whatever the term is. But it, what I'm saying, it was something that just made you go, the world is right because Gang Starr is back. And that's kind of how this record sounds, you know what I'm saying? And that album did. That album was way better than I anticipated. Usually I don't like albums that come out after the artist has passed and it's been put together by someone else. But I think DJ Premier did an excellent job with this. Along with this song, man, it works and it almost sounds fresh. But again, for those who don't know Gang Starr, aren't familiar with Guru and his rhyming style, you may feel like that's what y'all be talking about. And again, I basically broke down a description. When you think of Gang Starr, there's a reason why they're held in high esteem as one of the best groups of all time. And it's not about is Guru better than Prodigy or is Guru better than Q-Tip or better than Run from Run DMC or Three Stacks or Big Boy. It's not about like him being the best MC out of MCs within a group. It's really about him and Premier's chemistry and how it's just flawless. And every time you hear it, it's like the beat is perfect and what Guru has to say is perfect. And it seemed like it all took one take, So definitely check that out. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you just want to hear some beats. Maybe you hear the beats and then you want to go listen to the album. Why not? I don't know if I'll listen to the beats because I heard the album before and it would just make me want to listen to the album. But it's called One of the Best Yet. It's an instrumental album by Gang Starr and features a unreleased Gang Starr record, unreleased vocals of Guru. It's called Glowing Mike. That's going to do it for me for this week. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at VegasWorldINC. And please know that this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you got to do is search for the words Hip Hop Now Podcast, hit that subscribe button, like button, and stay locked in for more weekly content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.